Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here again digging into sources, research, and our own notes to pull out what matters for you.
Yeah, getting right into it.
Today we're looking at a life that's, well, a real paradox. It shows how someone can go through immense internal pain, real anguish, and yet create some of the most loved, most sung spiritual songs in Christianity.
We're talking about William Cowper, 18th-century English poet, hymnist, a man whose life just doesn't fit neatly into any box.
Absolutely.
And our goal here, really, in this deep dive is to try and unpack that. How can someone experience such severe, lifelong psychological distress, really deep struggles, and yet have genuine faith? And not just faith, but this incredible poetic gift alongside it.
Yeah. What can we learn from his path, especially for us today, dealing with our own stuff or trying to understand how faith and mental well-being connect or sometimes maybe don't seem to connect easily?
Right. So we're drawing on his personal memoirs, which are quite revealing, and also John Piper's thoughts on him, plus other historical accounts to, piece together the story.
It's a story that, honestly, I find really gripping. You think about the sheer beauty of his hymns, songs millions have leaned on for centuries, finding truth and comfort. And then you put that next to the intense, just overwhelming despair he often felt. It's kind of staggering.
It really is.
Our sources mention how poetry became this really crucial thing for him. He actually said he lived with an almost constant awareness of the breach between the low intensity of my own passion and the staggering realities of the universe around me. That's quite a statement.
It is, and that makes you wonder, what was it about poetry specifically? Why was that the tool? It clearly wasn't just a pastime for him.
No, it seems like it was his way to try and bridge that gap inside him, to grab a hold of something huge and maybe terrifying and give it some kind of shape.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It wasn't just art for art's sake. It feels more like a desperate attempt sometimes to find language for things that are almost impossible to express.
Like deep grief, or those moments of spiritual insight.
Exactly. How do you talk about those things when ordinary words just, they fail you? Poetry, though, with its rhythm, its images, its way of using metaphor, it let him get closer to those big realities.
So it was a way to take the chaos, both inside and out, and give it a voice, maybe even a temporary sense of order.
I think so. A structure, a voice, a way to process it, perhaps.
Okay, so to really get this paradox, the hopeful hymns from the man wrestling with darkness, we need to go back to the beginning, to the roots of his anguish.
Yeah, his childhood, it was steeped in loss and trauma, really setting the stage for what came later.
He was born 1731 in Great Berkhamsted, England. His family was well off, but as you said, not evangelical like he'd become.
Right. And even before William arrived, that home was marked by grief. His parents had already lost 3 children just before he was born, between 1728 and 1731.
Wow.
And then after he was born, between 1731 and 1736, 2 more siblings died. So you have this picture of a household just filled with sustained heartache, as one source calls it, a constant presence of death from the very start.
That's a heavy atmosphere for anyone, let alone a child.
Absolutely. And that was just the backdrop for what became a really central trauma. In 1736, William was only 6. His mother, Anne, died just days after giving birth to his brother John.
6 years old. That's devastating.
It wasn't just sad, it was catastrophic for him. It created this huge, deep wound of pain and trauma. And we know it never really healed because he wrote about it 53 years later.
That's the poem about his mother's picture.
Exactly. On the receipt of my mother's picture out of Norfolk. And in it, he remembers that childhood grief so clearly. He calls himself dupe of tomorrow, even from a child. Always expecting her to come back, always having that hope crushed.
Imagine carrying that feeling your whole life, always waiting for something that's never going to happen.
It shapes you. Definitely.
So a childhood already deeply scarred by loss. And then what happens immediately after his mother dies just makes it worse, really.
It does. His father sent him away, straight away, to Pitman's boarding school, a decision Cowper himself later called a tragic mistake.
And school wasn't a refuge, was it? It was more trauma.
Oh, yes. Emotional pain piled on with physical and psychological cruelty. He was terribly persecuted by an older boy there.
His own words about it are chilling.
They are. Saying he was so scared he was afraid to lift up my eyes upon him higher than his knees, and that I knew him by his shoe buckles.
Just awful. And looking back, people reading that often see hints of potential sexual abuse, right?
Yeah.
Given how trauma like that gets remembered and described.
Yes, that interpretation is certainly there in the sources. This horrible experience at school coming right after losing his mother, and then what the sources call the virtual loss of his father. Not physical absence necessarily, but emotional distance.
That detachment.
Exactly. These things are seen as foundational pieces of his lifelong gloom. Some analyses even suggest these early wounds affected his relationships with women later on, like Lady Austen.
And his poetry speaks to that paternal void, too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That poem, Tarsneme.
It does. It's described as a loud cry for his father to have been there for him, a really powerful plea for fathers to be involved, to be attentive, especially in their children's education. He's basically saying, I didn't have that, and look what happened.
And it's telling, isn't it, that he never wrote a single line praising his father. Just silence.
Total silence, as the sources put it. Like, that whole relationship was just too painful or too empty to even touch poetically.
And the father's influence, or lack of it, gets even more disturbing. There's that incident when Cowper was 11.
Oh, yeah. That's deeply unsettling. His father asks him to read A Vindication of Self-Murder, basically, an essay arguing for suicide, and then asks young William for his opinion.
An 11-year-old.
Right. And Cowper, even as a kid, argues against it. But his father just stays silent. No guidance, no correction, nothing.
Which led Cowper to think his own father agreed with the author.
That's what Cowper believed, yes. That his father sided with the author against me. Think about that, exposing a child to that idea and then offering no clear moral compass. It almost certainly fed into his later struggles with suicidal thoughts. It's like it normalized the very idea that should have been strongly refuted.
So you see this pattern forming. Loss, trauma, lack of stable support. It's laying a really shaky foundation.
Definitely. And it leads, predictably perhaps, to his first major collapse. In 1752, when he was 21, he hits what's called his first paralyzing depression.
His description is raw. Day and night I was upon the rack, lying down in horror and rising up in despair.
Visceral, isn't it? He completely lost interest in his studies. The classics, which he'd pursued, offered nothing. This was the start of the pattern that would basically define his life.
The struggle with despair really became his life's theme.
As Piper puts it, yeah. This wasn't just sadness, it was the beginning of something chronic, something deep-seated.
But even then, right in that first dark episode, something flickered. He found George Herbert's poems.
Yes. Described as uncouth and gothic, maybe meaning old-fashioned or spiritually intense compared to the Enlightenment rationality of the day.
Could be. But they spoke to his soul. Herbert was a 17th-century Anglican priest, and his poetry has this raw spiritual honesty.
And one poem in particular, The Pulley, gave Cowper a new way to think about his suffering.
Explain that one.
Well, Herbert suggests God gives humanity all gifts except rest, and the reason, not cruelty, but so that our very restlessness, our weariness might toss us to his breast.
So even the lack of peace could have a divine purpose to draw us closer to God.
That's the idea. For Cowper, this wasn't just nice poetry, it was a theological insight, a way to frame his struggle, maybe find a sliver of hope or meaning in it, suggesting God was still working, even in the pain.
And during these early adult years, there was also heartbreak, wasn't there? The lost love.
Yes, another layer of pain. Between about 1749 and 1756, he fell in love with his cousin, Theodora. They even got engaged.
But her father stopped it.
He did. The official reason was consanguinity. They were related by blood, a bigger deal back then. But sources strongly suggest the father was also worried about Cowper's mental state, which was already becoming apparent.
So they were forbidden to marry.
Yes. And heartbreakingly, they never saw each other again after that. It left this abiding pain for Cowper.
But Theodora, she never forgot him.
No, she outlived him, never married herself, and anonymously sent him money throughout his life to help support him. A hidden, lifelong devotion.
Wow. And he wrote poems to her.
19 of them addressed to Delia, a kind of monument to that lost love, still feeling the pain years later.
So all these early wounds, the losses, the trauma, the thwarted love, they're all accumulating. It feels like something has to break eventually.
And it does, big time. In 1763, that year becomes a major turning point, deep breakdown, but also, incredibly, the place of his conversion.
What triggered the breakdown?
It was the prospect of a public examination for a job, clerk of journals in Parliament. The thought of that public scrutiny just sent him into a total mental breakdown.
He described it like facing execution.
Exactly. Those of a man when he arrives at the place of execution. The sheer terror pushed him over the edge into utter desperation.
And that led to the suicide attempts.
Yes. 3 distinct attempts. laudanum first, then trying to drown himself, then trying to hang himself.
Wait, one failed?
Providentially thwarted is how the sources put it. But afterwards, he was crushed by this horrible conviction of sin. He felt as guilty as if he had succeeded, terrified of God's judgment.
Everything seemed to condemn him.
Everything. Reading, thinking, even sleep brought nightmares. He said he'd wake up reeling like a drunken man, just overwhelmed by guilt and fear.
It sounds absolutely terrifying, which led to him being committed.
Yes, in December 1763, he was taken to St. Albans Insane Asylum, and there he met Dr. Nathaniel Cotton.
And Dr. Cotton wasn't just any doctor.
No, the sources make a point of saying he was an evangelical believer and a lover of God and the gospel. This is key.
Yeah.
He didn't just treat Cowper clinically, he genuinely cared for him, loved him.
And he kept offering hope, even when Cowper insisted he was damned.
Repeatedly, held out hope to him repeatedly. That compassionate, faith-informed care created the space for what happened next.
Which was?
6 months into his stay, he's in the garden, finds a Bible left on a bench. Just happens upon it.
Okay.
He opens it, almost randomly it seems, to John 11, the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead.
Ah, a story of resurrection.
Exactly. And as he reads it, he sees something powerful in Jesus' actions. So much benevolence, mercy, goodness, and sympathy with miserable men. He said he almost shed tears.
A crack in the despair.
A softening, yes. He even wished he hadn't rejected so good a redeemer. It wasn't conversion yet, but his heart was being prepared. The ice was starting to thaw, you could say.
Then came the actual moment. He felt led to the Bible again.
Yes. And the first verse he saw was Romans 3.25, the King James Version. Whom God hath set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood, to declare his righteousness for the remission of sins that are past, through the forbearance of God.
Propitiation, that's a big theological word.
Huge for Cowper. It means an atoning sacrifice that satisfies God's wrath against sin. For someone drowning in guilt and fear of judgment, that word was everything.
It meant Christ took the punishment.
Precisely. Christ's blood satisfied God's justice. His sins were forgiven. He was declared righteous. Instantly, Cowper said, he received the strength to believe it.
He described it as light breaking through.
The full beams of the Sun of Righteousness shining upon me. He saw the sufficiency of the atonement, his pardon sealed in his blood, the fullness and completeness of his justification.
It wasn't just an idea, it was real rescue for him.
Absolutely. He said he believed and received the gospel right then and there, overwhelmed with gratitude, joy, felt he would have physically died without God holding him up.
And those earlier conversations with his cousin, Martin Madan, the pastor.
They came flooding back. The things Madan had told him about original sin and Christ's all-atoning blood suddenly made perfect sense, revived in all its clearness. It was a sudden, bright, saving encounter with God's grace through the cross.
It's such a dramatic turnaround. And it shows how real it was, because he actually stayed at St. Albans for another year after this.
Yeah, 12 more months. He'd grown to love the place, and Dr. Cotton found stability, spiritual growth there. It shows the healing that started in that asylum.
So after St. Albans, where did he find support? He needed ongoing care, presumably.
He did, and he found it with the Unwin family. He left the asylum in June 1765 and moved in with them in Huntington.
And Mary Unwin became very important to him.
Immensely. She was 8 years older, became like a mother figure, cared for him through all his later mental health struggles for nearly 30 years. He lived in her home until she died. She was this constant, loving presence.
Provided a stable home he hadn't really had.
Yes, a place of acceptance and relative peace. Then, in 1767, Mary's husband died. And that led them to seek out ministry from someone who became maybe the most crucial relationship in Cowper's life.
John Newton.
John Newton. Pastor at Olney from 1764 to 1780. Our sources call him the most important relationship in Cowper's life. And Cowper himself said, a sincerer or more affectionate friend no man ever had. That's high praise from him.
Newton, the writer of Amazing Grace, right? He had quite a backstory himself.
Oh, absolutely. Former slave ship captain, known as the Old African Blasphemer, had a dramatic conversion. He embraced Whitefield's Calvinistic theology, God's sovereignty, predestination, grace.
And that theology shaped Cowper's faith, too.
Very much so. Gave Cowper that warm evangelical brand of Calvinism, a framework of God's ultimate control, which could be comforting, but maybe also, for someone like Cowper, sometimes frightening when he doubted his own standing.
It's interesting Newton also lost his mother at age 6, like Cowper.
It is, but the key difference the sources point out is Newton didn't lose his father in the same way. He traveled with his father on ships, had that paternal presence, that solid rock, which Cowper lacked, a potentially huge difference in their development.
Newton seems like he was a really grounded pastor.
Described as one of the healthiest, happiest pastors of the time, loved by his people, had this great attitude. Every knock on his door was a message from God. Wanted to just tip the balance, even slightly, from misery towards happiness.
And he saw Cowper's tendencies, the melancholy, the reclusiveness.
He did. And he didn't just let Cowper withdraw. He actively drew him into ministry, visiting the sick, the poor, trying to get him focused outward, gently breaking that cycle of inward-looking despair.
A very wise approach.
And that led to their big collaboration, the Only Hymns.
Right, Newton's idea, believing it would be good for Cowper.
Exactly. Good for his poetic bent to be engaged, give him something productive, purposeful to do. It resulted in the hymn book published in 1779.
Which is just full of classics.
Absolutely. About 200 hymns by Newton, 68 by Cowper. Cowper gave us God Moves in a Mysterious Way. There is a fountain filled with blood.
Newton gave us How Sweet the Name of Jesus Sounds, Glorious Things of the Earth Spoken. Just an incredible legacy from that partnership.
It really was more than just writing. It was pastoral care through shared work, bringing beauty out of suffering.
And Newton's support didn't waver, did it? Even when Cowper had severe relapses.
No, he was steadfast. Like in 1773, when Cowper had that fatal dream and plunged back into despair, Newton canceled his own vacation to stay with him. He really lived out that principle. Do not despair of the despairing.
That's real friendship, real pastoral care.
It is. And even when Newton moved to London in 1780, he didn't disappear. They kept up this intense correspondence for 20 years. Cowper poured out his soul to Newton like no one else.
And Newton's visits still helped.
Yes, brought comforts, helped Cowper feel affection, a vital link to the outside, to someone who understood both his faith and his pain.
Let's shift focus a bit now, back to the poetry itself. We touched on it. But what exactly was its role for Cowper? More than just hymns, right?
Oh, much more. It was solace, purpose, even a way he felt he connected with God, or at least processed those staggering realities we talked about.
That feeling of the gap between his own small feelings and the huge universe.
Yeah, that breach. Poetry was his attempt to close this breach. Like when he wrote about his mother's picture, it wasn't just remembering. It brought deep relief, a pleasant, painful satisfaction.
It helped him capture and release the feeling, make sense of it.
Exactly. To better grasp what his mind knew and his heart felt. And it's interesting, the sources remind us how much of the Bible itself is poetry, over 300 pages, suggesting God himself uses poetry to bridge that gap between our often dull hearts and his vibrant reality.
So poetry had this power for him from early on, like finding Herbert's poems during that first depression.
Yes, back in 1752, they gave him Help and Light. Herbert's the pulley, again, offering that theological angle. Maybe God withholds rest sometimes, not to punish, but to draw us closer, to toss us to his breast. That gave him a thread of hope, a way to understand his restlessness.
And Newton specifically encouraged this poetic gift, didn't he, with the Only Hymns?
Strategically, yes. To combat the melancholy, the withdrawal, it gave Cowper productive activity, a sense of purpose, channeling that creative energy outwards instead of letting it turn inwards destructively. Just crafting those hymns must have been grounding for him.
What's amazing is he held on to the core truths, the evangelical beliefs, even in his darkest times.
He did. He poured himself into big projects like The Task, that long meditative poem. And he said he wrote it to teach truths divine and clear, which, couched in prose, they would not hear.
So he saw poetry as a way to get spiritual truth past people's defenses.
That seems to be the idea. And it worked. His poetry helped spread the ideas of the evangelical awakening among the educated classes. He effectively became the movement's poet laureate, using his gift, even through suffering, for the gospel.
Even his very last poem, The Castaway, written when he was apparently in total despair. There's something there, isn't there?
There is. The sheer act of writing a beautiful, structured poem suggests his spirit wasn't totally deadened. There was still an alertness to spiritual reality and poetic form, a delight in beauty, even if faint.
And that line, misery still delights to trace its semblance in another's case. It's like he's actively processing, finding connection, even in isolation.
Well, yes. And interestingly, he'd used the title The Castaway before, in an only hymn.
Oh, what did it mean there?
In the hymn, being a castaway or facing trials was seen as evidence of being a true child of God, undergoing refinement, not necessarily ultimate rejection.
So maybe the final poem isn't just utter hopelessness. Could there be a deeper layer connecting his suffering to the trials of God's people?
It's possible it leaves room for a more nuanced reading, suggesting that even in the depths, the theological truths he knew might still be subtly present in his art.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what are the takeaways for us, for you listening? Thinking about faith, mental well-being, how does Cowper's story speak to us? His life was just this long accumulation of pain, wasn't it? Breakdown after breakdown.
Yes, like that fatal dream in 1773, where he became convinced he was lost, damned. And he lived almost 30 more years after that, dying in 1800, apparently in despair. Those last words, what can it signify? Just heartbreaking.
Yet, and this is the paradox again, even while believing he was lost, an exception to God's preserving grace. He never denied his conversion experience itself, did he?
No, never. That's crucial. He questioned his current standing, his feelings, his fate, but not the reality of that moment when he met Christ in the asylum.
And his poetry sometimes contradicted his despair, like the stricken deer passage in The Task.
Exactly. Written in the same later period, yet it talks about Christ healing him. It suggests moments where he did feel and affirm that healing, even if those feelings didn't last or went out overall. And the castaway shows that active mind, that sense of form. It wasn't complete emptiness. His feeling was damnation, but that feeling didn't erase the past reality or his capacity for beauty.
So how do we navigate this? Such contradiction, such suffering alongside faith and art. John Piper draws out some key lessons from Cowper's life for us. What's the first one?
First, distrust the certainties of despair. Piper points to Cowper's inconsistencies, believing he's lost, yet writing about being healed. It shows that our feelings, especially in deep despair, aren't always accurate reflections of reality or God's truth. We need to cultivate a healthy skepticism towards those overwhelming negative certainties.
That's helpful. How often do we assume our worst feelings are the truest thing about us or our situation?
Exactly. Second lesson hits close to home for parents or mentors. Love your children dearly and be present. Cowper's early life, mother's death, awful boarding school, detached father, underscores how vital loving parental presence is for healthy development.
Contrasted with Newton, who lost his mother but had his father.
Yes, Newton had that solid rock his father provided, even with the hardships of sea life. Cowper lacked that anchor. It's a stark reminder of the impact we have on young lives.
Third lesson is about how we treat others who are struggling. Despair not of the despairing.
This is about the power of steadfast friendship, like Newton's for Cowper. Newton stayed present, offered comfort, brought a ray of hope, even when Cowper seemed unreachable. It teaches us the immense value of just sticking with people, refusing to give up on them, even when they've given up on themselves. That consistent, compassionate presence is a form of grace.
It's easy to get worn out by someone else's despair, but Newton's example is powerful. What's next?
Fourth is what Piper calls the healthy gift of self-forgetfulness. He suggests that too much introspection, which Cowper certainly experienced, can be destructive. It cuts us off from experiencing good things outside ourselves.
So mental well-being involves focusing outwards.
Yes, using the mind to focus on worthy reality outside ourselves. Even simple things, looking at a tree, a flower, a person, and just being glad they exist. Consciously shifting focus away from the internal turmoil. Newton tried to help Cowper with this through ministry and poetry.
Okay, number 5 is a bit more speculative.
A cautious observation, yes. Piper wonders if Cowper's somewhat sheltered life, his rural ease and leisure, his distance from the world of need, might have actually hindered his mental health.
Not saying it would have cured him,
But posing the question, could engaging more directly with the needs and difficulties of others, the path of love, no matter how dirty or dangerous, have offered a path towards greater wholeness? It's a thought-provoking idea about how serving others can sometimes pull us out of ourselves.
Interesting. What's the 6th lesson?
This one sounds paradoxical. The hope-giving fruit of feeling hopelessness, meaning sharing stories of deep suffering, even ones like Cowper's, without a neat happy ending in this life, can actually bring hope to others feeling similarly lost.
Oh, so?
Because people read Cowper's honest struggles and feel understood. His bleak life was felt by many as hope-giving because it validated their own pain. It's like David's raw cries in the Psalms, they comfort others in the pit. It shows God's patience, his presence even in unresolved suffering.
And the final lesson, perhaps the most important for ministry, or for anyone supporting someone in despair.
Yes. Never cease to sing the gospel to the deaf. Keep rehearsing the mercies of Jesus. Keep pointing people back to the cross, to the blood of Christ. Remember, Cowper's conversion came from seeing Christ's mercy and understanding the sufficiency of the atonement.
Even if they say they can't hear it or believe it applies to them.
Especially then, keep proclaiming Christ's sacrifice, his love. Help them, as Piper says, to doubt your despairing thoughts. Remind them their final state isn't theirs to know for sure. Their job is simply to listen to Jesus. Our job is to keep speaking his truth, persistently and patiently.
It brings us back to that central paradox, doesn't it? Cowper, a man so often overwhelmed by despair. Yet his words, those hymns like "There is a fountain filled with blood," they just keep pouring out truth and strength for people, century after century.
They do. His life really shows that faith isn't about feeling good all the time or being free from suffering here and now. It's about having an anchor, even when the storm is raging inside. His story teaches us so much about trauma's long shadow, about the lifeline of community and friendship, and about the sheer, stubborn power of the gospel message to shine even in the darkest places.
So, as you've listened today, think about it. What part of Cowper's struggle, or maybe his sources of comfort, connects with you? Does it change how you see mental health struggles in yourself or others, especially within a faith context? Maybe consider how the ongoing witness of someone like William Cowper, flaws and all, can still offer guidance, still offer hope, even when things feel incredibly dark.